Welcome to this presentation of the Otter Tail Watershed Restoration and Protection Strategies, better known as RAPS. This presentation was put together by the East Otter Tail SWCD and sponsored with funds from the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, with funding from the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment.
RAPS is an acronym that we've used for a report that is the result of several years of monitoring, assessing, preparing, and editing by the MPCA, other state agencies, local government units, and other public and private organizations. The RAPS is a key tool for state and local water resource professionals because it helps identify what can be done to clean up or restore streams and lakes that are considered to be impaired or that fail to meet certain state water quality standards. The RAPS also identifies what can be done to protect streams and lakes so that they don't become impaired in the future. More information about this will be provided later in the presentation. A typical RAPS process takes about 4 or 5 years to complete. Right now we are finishing with all of the reporting and data compilation, and we are working in year 4 of the process as shown on this slide. The RAPS report then summarizes all of the information collected and prepared throughout the process. A final version of the RAPS report is expected later this year. One important study that is being developed along with the RAPS is called the Total Maximum Daily Load, or TMDL study. The TMDL study plays an important role in the process by identifying what needs to happen for certain impaired water bodies to meet the applicable water quality standards. Once the TMDL report is finalized, the RAPS can be finalized too. At that point, the RAPS and TMDL reports will also be shared on the MPCA's Otter Tail River Watershed webpage, along with the already completed Watershed Monitoring and Assessment Report and the stressor identification reports for streams and lakes. A link to this webpage will be provided as part of this presentation.
I don't expect or encourage anyone to read the entire document because it's very long, 199 pages, and it's chock full of information. It can be used for a variety of water resource professionals and citizens alike, making it a very valuable tool. We'll get into some of the content here, but there is even more in the report we won't be covering today. Here you have pictured a word cloud of the Otter Tail RAPS. These are some of the most important and repetitive words in the entire document. You can see clearly meets standards and full support right in the middle. And these words are used for water bodies that are good condition. And that is great because these are some of the most common phrases in the whole document. The RAPS process has a lot of prescriptive elements that can't be changed. They are based on data and monitoring from very specific guidelines. However, we can change some other things to match local priorities. And that is what we are asking today, that you will take the time to help us move the RAPS document from one where we inform you what's in it to one where we consulted you about what was in it. It is a small step, and we're hoping to bring in elements of involve, collaborate, and empower in future actions within the watershed.
Much of the data that was used to analyze lakes and streams in the watershed was collected by citizen monitors. This includes lake associations, stream volunteers, and other citizen groups.
This information is vitally important to understanding the issues in a lake or stream and was used to determine results. Thank you for collecting this data. Without it, we would not know so much about the watershed.
I'll be going through what Mariah showed now, but these are only examples to show how the plan will be used to adopt practices and make priorities and decisions. If you read some or all of the plan and have other questions, please feel free to contact me directly. My contact information will be at the end of the presentation. First, we have a list of all the lakes and streams and if they're meeting water standards based on the monitoring results. And this is kind of the first method to subdivide the water bodies into 3 basic categories. The data for a water body supports meeting the water quality or aquatic life standard, SUP. The data for a water body supports the water body failing to meet water quality or aquatic life standards, IMP. Or the data for the water body doesn't support either meeting or failing the water quality or aquatic life standard, IF. And this can be for a few reasons. The most common are that the water body didn't have enough data to assess. The data was so close to impairment that it was too close to call without additional data. Or that the data was deemed invalid due to timing, handling, or other reasons. And so you'll see a couple of examples of that on the page here. Here are all the new impairments in the watershed for lakes. If your lake is on this list, I encourage you to contact myself or your lake association to learn more. I've also included a map of the impaired lakes that are new on this year's list. Note that this shows only the phosphorus impairments. Again, if you have questions about a specific stream reach or lake, please contact me at the end of the presentation. Here are all the newly impaired streams in the watershed. If you have any questions about the specific stream reach, contact me at the end of the presentation. Here's a map showing all of the newly identified E. coli and sediment impairments. After we identified those impaired waters, we looked at trend data of lakes, if enough data was available, to determine which ones are at risk. And we included zebra mussels because they can have an effect on water clarity that may not necessarily be related to water quality. This trend data was made possible by monitoring from local citizens and lake associations and others, like Mariah said earlier, so thank you. MPCA took a deeper look at the aquatic life impairments and determined why they might be impaired. I won't go into a lot of detail here because there is an overload of information available, but please contact me if you want to know more. This is just to show a little bit of background on how we prioritized some of the water bodies in the watershed. The action and implementation table has a lot of information that can be used to help identify what to do, where, and what might be the most important places to do it. We start by focusing on a sub-watershed. Then, we might narrow down to a specific water body. The water quality columns then give us an idea if the water body is impaired or if it's in another category, such as nearly or barely impaired. And the nearly and barely impaired basically just means that those are high priority areas because they're either nearly impaired, almost at that impairment level, or barely impaired, just above that impairment level, but could easily become under that impairment level. It then shows how much reduction may be needed for restoration, if it's impaired, or protection, if it's not impaired. And the next several columns all give possible action and implementation activities to address the goal. And there's an interim 10-year goal too, which is a more reasonable starting point than the full water quality goal. These pages in the plan can be used by lake associations, LIDs, landowner groups, resource professionals, to kind of figure out what issues are out there and how best to address them. In a large watershed like the Otter Tail, this means it's a very big table, but it can be narrowed down and searched for with a specific place of interest in. Following that big table is a slightly smaller table that outlines a little more of the details on types of practices. For example, when an action says do practices for cities and yards, we can take a look at this table and see a variety of practices, such as rain gardens and rain barrels, planting trees, shrubs, permeable pavement, and several others. Determining which of these practices to do involves landowner input, applicability to land type, based on soil, slope, other factors. And part of this can be done within a small group, such as a lake association or a local ag work group, but part of it may require some technical expertise. That's where the SWCD and our state and federal partners come in. We can help make the determination of what is technically feasible and what provides the greatest water quality benefit to a specific water body. And there are several other models, tools, and results that we can use to help us determine feasibility and water quality benefit to both surface water and groundwater that were a part of this report. Here are two examples, but there are several others. After the RAPS is done, we'll start working on a planning process that will take all the data from the RAPS, add in local priorities, and create a focused, action-oriented document called a One Watershed, One Plan. You'll see it abbreviated as 1W, 1P. Many times the RAPs in the One Watershed 1 plan are mentioned in the same breath, so hopefully you have a little better idea that they are separate processes. And as we move into One Watershed 1 plan, we are going to be looking to involve and collaborate with a small group of individuals to represent parts of the watershed. If you are interested in becoming a part of that small group, please let me know. Lastly, we are asking for your feedback. After this presentation, please use the link below this video or possibly provided to you by your local organization to answer a few short questions about actions and information in RAPs. Thank you in advance to everyone that answers questions. Here's my contact information for anyone that might have additional questions or comments. And there are additional videos linked below from our partners. So if you're interested in learning more, feel free to explore some of them. Thank you all for listening to this presentation.